If you have a foot roller, go ahead and get that. Tennis ball or lacrosse ball. All right, so last week we focused on feet and calves. Today we're gonna focus on hamstrings. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the foot and calf warm up because I find that when my calves are tight, I have a harder time getting range in my hamstrings. So calves and hamstrings are very closely connected. So we're gonna work on a little bit of that before we get into the hamstrings today. I'm gonna have you guys testing your range a lot because I want you to be thinking about what works for your body and sort of noticing with all the things we do today, what makes a difference and what doesn't, so that you can sort of tailor it to what your body needs and your recovery process and all that. So let's start with a little foot, testing range actually. Before a foot warm up, test your range in hamstring stretch. Just stretch forward and test your range to the side and to the other side. And in your pigeon. And make sure you test both sides. And you can test a lunge as well. And you can test front splits if you like. I'm not going to today, but you can test middle splits. Whatever stretches you want to see a difference in, try testing them. And let's go ahead and stand up and test our calf and foot range also. Sometimes hamstrings has an effect on that. And dummy point, feet, all that fun stuff. Okay, so now that we have an idea of where our body's at today, go ahead and take your foot roller or ball, whichever one you have, and go ahead and give yourself a little foot warm up. And if you don't have a ball, you can massage your feet like we did last week, going along the 3 points of the foot. So the arch, the middle of the foot, and the outside of the foot. Just fly out here. But if you have a foot roller, this will be a little bit faster. And go ahead and roll out your other foot. And if you have your ball, you can also do the one where you let your foot sort of melt over the top of the tennis ball and roll it side to side to get a little bit of ankle mobilization. And you can roll it front to back as well. And the other side. And when you're done with that, go ahead, sit down, and start on your calf. So if you have a stick or a rolling pin, start with the inside of your calf. If you don't, you can just use your hands to massage. But we're gonna work on the inside first. And go ahead and work on the middle of your calf. So remember the back side of your calf. And the outside. And remember, you can also do this with a tennis ball or a foam roller. So if you have a tennis ball, you can roll this way. You can also do inside, turn it in, and outside, turn it out. And if you have the foam roller, same thing. Middle of the foot or middle of the leg just goes back and forth. Turn it in to get the inside and turn it out to get the outside. And when you've done the outside of your leg, go ahead and switch to your other leg. And go ahead and massage the middle and the outside as well. I'm gonna go grab a charging cable for my computer because it's dying. All right, finish up with your calves and let's test our range again. So hamstrings, we're just gonna test hamstrings and to the side, on each side, because this is the area we're going to be focusing on the most today. And middle, and you can test splits if you want, but that's gonna be a lot of testing the splits. All right. So just like we talked about the 3 lines of the calves last week, we're going to talk about 3 lines of the hamstring this week. So again, this is not anatomically correct. This is not how our muscles are built, but this is just sort of a tool to use to help you figure out where to roll easily. So on my hamstring, I have the middle line, the inner hamstring, and the outer hamstring. And then we're going to be focusing on 2 other areas today, which is the very, very inside of the leg, which attaches to the knee right here. It's called the gracilis. And then the very, very outside of the leg, your IT band. So we're going to be focusing on those 5 lines today when we're rolling out. So the first thing we're going to roll out is the inner hamstring. And this plays a really big role in flexibility for side extensions, splits, grand jeté of any kind, a lot of grand allegro, caissons, just a lot of things. So it's really important to make sure that the inner hamstring is loose. So the way to target that is I want you guys to bend your knee and feel sort of behind the knee. You're gonna feel two tendons. There's gonna be one that's sort of on this side and one that's on this side. Can you guys feel that in your body? Yes? No? Yeah? So the inner one, you're gonna follow that tendon a little bit down and out. A little bit down and out. That's the area that we're gonna focus on rolling out first, is kind of where, not the tendon itself, because you don't ever wanna roll a tendon because it can bruise easily, but the muscle that attaches to that tendon, that's what we're focusing on. So take your roller, if you have one, and turn your leg in slightly. So this is not all the way here, but this is just slightly turned in, and you're just gonna roll vertically along your leg. That is targeting the inner hamstring. This is also an area that can have an effect on you if your legs are a little bit bent just naturally. Mine were pretty bent for a long time and I thought it was bone structure, but one of my teachers told me, no, your legs are just really, really tight. And as soon as I started rolling out and stretching more, they started straightening. So a lot of that had to do with the inner hamstring. It also had to do with some other areas of the hamstring, but we're gonna get to that later. So another thing you can do if you want is you can put your other leg on top to get a little bit more pressure as you roll. And sometimes that's helpful if you feel like you're not getting enough pressure in your rolling. So let's go ahead and test our range in our hamstrings. And you may feel a difference between your two legs. You may not. Does anybody feel a difference? Yeah? Yeah. For people with super flexible hamstrings, no, but most of us use our hamstrings so much that they get a bit tight. So that one is great. Next, we're gonna roll out the middle section of our hamstrings. So this is really simple. It's just kneecap pointing to the ceiling, completely parallel, and just roll. And this area is a little less tight on most people. Most people have an imbalance on sort of the outside or the inside of the leg, and the middle is not as tight. But the middle really has an effect on front splits and any extension where the leg is parallel to the front. So soda shot is another one. So the front leg is parallel to the floor. Ideally, it's turned out, but I don't think I've ever seen a person who has a turned out front leg in a soda shot. And once we've done that, let's test our range again in our hamstrings. We're gonna be doing a lot of this. See if you feel a difference. And let's go ahead and test it to the side also. The side. And just for grins, test your other side and compare. Do you feel a difference between the two? Yes, no, some people yes, some people no. Yeah. Let's do the outer hamstring. So this one is a little bit tricky to find sometimes, but remember the two tendons that we just found behind our knee? The outer one, if you trace it downwards, that's the area that you're going to be rolling out, the outside. Now this is a really important muscle that gets neglected when we're stretching and rolling a lot, and even in class just thinking about it. So before we do this, can somebody tell me what they think the outer hamstring is really important for? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you have an idea. There's many right answers here. Yep, turnout. Turn out. Holding extensions. Keeping your legs straight and pulled up. Yep. Flexibility. Yeah. So our outer hamstrings are important for so many things. And I am going to give a couple examples. So outer hamstrings do have a really big effect on our turnout. So turnout is supposed to come from the hips, but it also comes from the top of our hamstrings, because just your hips alone are not going to do the work to open your legs. When you're actually moving your legs, your hamstrings have to do a little bit of that supporting, right? So when you're turned out, if you're going to the front in extension and this is tight, it's going to start pulling your leg in or bent or both, as is the case with a lot of people and definitely the case for me. So we want to make sure this is loose and long, so that way we can get the most range and turnout to the front and it won't pull it back this way. So everybody just take your leg up and turn it out. And I want you to feel the hamstring and what it does. It's pretty tight, right? It's engaged. And then when you turn it in, it loosens a little bit, right? So that's why it's so important to work on finding range on the outside and making sure this is loose and healthy, because otherwise there is absolutely no way you're going to be able to hold your leg up and turn out to the front in anything, in a grand jeté, in an extension, an assemblé. It's just really, really important. The other thing is when you're standing and you're trying to turn out, the muscle that you need to be using is in the back, which attaches to the outside. So it's from the top of the hips and it spirals out and around the back. And if this is tight back here, it's really hard for you to straighten and lengthen your legs back there, because this is already partially engaged. This is already partially engaged, and we only have this much more to go as opposed to our full range of expansion and contraction. So that is another reason why it's just really, really important to focus on the outsides. So without further ado, let's roll out the outsides of our hamstring. So again, find that tendon, and you'll have to turn in a little bit, not all the way because that's IT band, but just a little bit, and roll it out. And you can also put your leg on top of your other leg to get a little bit more pressure there. And this is the one area where it is okay to roll all the way from the hamstring to the calf, because you're not really rolling over the sensitive part of the back of your knee. So if you want to roll from here all the way up to the hamstring, that's actually okay, as long as you're being careful, of course. And it's usually a little bit easier if you just focus on a smaller section of the muscle at a time and then move to a different section, as opposed to doing all the way and all the way every single time. Okay, now go ahead and test your range in your hamstrings again. And for this one, the outside of the hamstring makes the biggest difference for me. It will for some people, it may not for other people. Does anybody feel a huge difference after rolling out the outside, or more the inside? Thumbs up if it's inside, thumbs down if it's outside. Yeah, so some of each. It just depends on your body type. I'm going to talk a little bit about muscle imbalances in a bit. But let's roll out the gracilis next. So this has an effect on when you're doing middle splits, extension, a la seconde, and straightening your knees. So this is another thing where if you have trouble straightening your knees, it might be the gracilis close to the knee that's affecting that. So it's this muscle that attaches right here to the knee. You can feel that on yourself. There's kind of like a muscle and it goes all the way up and it attaches into your hip, in the middle of your hip. And when that gets tight, you can't hold your leg to the side and you can't do the middle splits. So to roll that out is really easy. You just turn your leg completely in and roll. And there's two areas you can roll. There's by the knee, and then there's up a lot closer to the hip, which this is actually something that we're gonna do when we work on hips and quads, which will be next week. But it's that whole muscle there that has an effect. So I'm gonna stay focusing a little bit closer to the knee for today. You guys can experiment with both, or rolling all the way up and down. And let's go ahead and test our range one more time. And I know we're doing a lot of tests, but this is because I want you guys to be paying attention to your body and seeing what is working for you and what isn't. So for some people, you may feel a difference. For some people, not at all. And it all depends on how pliable you are, how flexible you are, and just what's working for your body. This is probably where you'll notice it the most. What we just rolled out, you can test in the straddle. And this is great because you'll actually be able to feel a difference between your two legs sometimes. The one that's rolled out and the one that isn't. All right, so last thing in this group of rolling exercises is the IT band. And this is pretty simple. You just turn it in and roll on the side. And this can be really, really painful for some people. So if this is too much for you, and you have a massage stick, you can just turn your leg in and roll out the outside. Or if you don't have that, you can just pound on the muscle or kind of knead the muscle to get it a little bit looser. But I personally like to use the foam roller. And this is something that you want to be careful not to overroll because your IT band is kind of sensitive. So you don't want to spend too much time on this. And I'll give you more time to experiment with that when we do the left side. So now I want you to test your range in hamstrings and to the side. And compare with your other leg. See if it feels different at all. And just because I'm curious, and this will be good to see how people's bodies work differently, go ahead and come to your computer or whatever and type in the chat box which area you felt made the biggest difference for you when rolling, or if none of it made a difference at all. Difference. Yeah, if your hamstrings are already really loose, you might not feel a difference. IT band, inner and outer, IT band, inside and outside, outer. Yeah, it'll be different for different people. So just as long as you know what works for your body, some people may not need to roll out their hamstrings at all. Some people may need a lot of it. It's just all very, very personal. So now we're gonna do one other thing for the hamstrings, and this is for the attachment, the glute hamstring attachment. So your glutes and your hamstrings are connected basically, right under your butt, kind of this area. And this area is the area we want to be using for turnout and where our work should come from. But if it's tight, we're not gonna have a lot of range, we're not gonna have a lot of strength, and we wanna make sure that's really healthy and loose. So the way to target this is to find a spot that feels tight and just sit on it. The attachment, it's not your butt and it's not quite the middle of your hamstring, it's just in between that area. And just sit and relax and try to think of your muscle just releasing over the ball. And sometimes you'll feel pulling like lower down in the leg, and that's because your entire muscle is connected all throughout your leg. And when one area is being worked on and you can feel the tightness, you can kind of feel it in other areas as well. And once you found a spot, you can move the ball to another spot. See if that makes a difference, if that helps at all. You can also, if you're very careful, roll side to side along that area. Just don't put all of your weight on it because there's a lot of tendons and it gets really sensitive. So for that, you want to make sure that you have some support with your hands, and then you can move side to side. But for some people, that doesn't feel as good as just staying. Another thing you can do if you don't have a foam roller on hand and you want a little bit more of an intense hamstring rollout is you can find a tight spot and you can roll vertically with your foot flexed along the tennis ball. And sometimes that makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't. All right. So before we do the left side, I'm gonna have you guys come back and tell me what you think would help. Well, actually, we're gonna do a couple different scenarios here, and you're gonna tell me what you think would work to help your body. So let's say that you're doing grand jetés in the center, the ones that are quasi, this way, and your front leg just won't turn out. No matter how hard you try, it just feels stuck. What would you do to try to find some more range in your turnout? What might you roll or stretch? Outer hamstring, very good. And IT band, yep. IT band also. Good. Yeah, good, you guys. Another situation. So let's say that you are doing a développé à la seconde and you can't straighten your leg all the way. What would you roll out in that situation? Can't straighten your working leg all the way. Inner. Inner hamstring. Inner hamstring, yep. Yeah, and also the gracilis, the one right opposite the IT band on the inside. So inner hamstring, yes, but also gracilis. This has an effect on if you can straighten your leg. I also want to talk a little bit about muscle imbalances. So different people's body types have different kinds of imbalances. So for instance, this is just one type that can occur that is pretty common. So some people have a tendency to pronate their leg inwards. This is how I naturally am. My hip flexors are very tight and they pull my entire leg inwards like this. So when my leg is pulled inwards, you can see that there's a shortening, shortening here, lengthening here, shortening here, and lengthening here. Just kind of weird. It's not just like this side is tight and this side is loose or vice versa. It's a zigzag sort of. So here, this is pulling in. This is contracted. This is really, really tight. This side is the leg. And this side is really, really loose. This side is really, really tight and this side is really loose. So what might I need to do there? I would probably need to roll this a lot to get that back and then roll out this to get the range here to fix that imbalance. Now, somebody who supinates, rolls the other way, they're going to have very long on the side, very tight in the calf, very tight in the IT band, and very loose on the inside. So For a lot of people who are hypermobile, really hyperextended legs, that's something that you'll see is you'll see a lot of length here, a lot of tightness here, length here, tightness here and then length here. So what you would want to do for that then is you would roll out the calf and you'd roll out the IT band to try to get that to rebalance. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? Yeah. So that's just something, if you notice that you have, your calves are really, really, really tight and you roll them out and you roll them out and you roll them out. And it's just the inner calf and it doesn't seem to work. Instead of rolling out the inner hamstring also, actually try rolling out the IT band in that situation. And that might help fix some of the imbalances, because if your IT band is tight and it's pulling your leg, then this is going to tighten up no matter how much you roll it out. So that's why you want to make sure there's balance in your body. Let's do our other leg. And then I'm going to show you guys some stretches that target both the hamstrings and the calf at the same time, and some other things that we can do for them. Actually, before that, another thing is, so, if your calves are really tight, they can affect your hamstrings. If your hamstrings are really tight, they can affect your calves. Actually, if your hamstrings are really tight, they can also affect your back, which I know seems a little bit counterintuitive, but your lower back, there's muscles that attach from your lower back all the way through your glutes to your hamstrings. So if your hamstrings are really tight, let's say you try to go into a contraction in contemporary, you might feel a lot of pulling here. So if you're feeling a lot of pulling here, you might want to roll out your hamstrings and see if that makes a difference. Same thing goes for if your hamstrings are super tight, your back actually might be kind of tight too. So if that's the case, then you want to roll out your back on the side a little bit to try to target that. And actually you can roll from your back all the way through your glute to your hamstring. So you can start at your lower back and you can roll all the way over your glute to your hamstring and all the way back. And sometimes that can help as well. So, yep, our entire body is connected. And there's kind of no one solution to everything, but it's fun to play around and figure out what works. So now let's do our other side so that we're even. We'll start with our inner hamstring on the left. Or for me, it's the right, because I rolled out my other side first. So slightly turned in, not all the way turned in, because that's the gracilis, just slightly turned in. And even if you don't feel a huge difference flexibility-wise, if you have days where you get really, really stiff, this is just gonna help a lot. So maybe you're not trying to increase your range, but maybe you're just trying to ease some of the tension in your muscles after you work them a lot and they're sore. This can be really helpful. And let's move to the middle hamstring. And there's different speeds at which you can roll. You can roll a little bit faster, you can roll a little bit slower. You'll start to figure out what feels good and what doesn't. And also sometimes if you're rolling out one area, like I'm rolling out the middle of my hamstring, but I find myself wanting to turn in because I can feel my leg is tighter on the inside, even just by putting pressure on the muscle around it. So that's another great thing about rolling, is usually your body tells you which parts want to be rolled when you start working on them. Let's switch to the outer hamstring. So turn out your leg just slightly. Another thing is if you feel that your hamstring is really tight and every time you try to roll over it, you're almost like flipping or shifting off the muscle, that's when you want to slow it down and try to see if you can stay on top of that muscle and not let it shift off the roller, because that usually indicates an area that's very, very tight. And so as much as you can, you want to actually work on it and not around it. Yeah, although there's some exceptions to that, but that's mostly with hips. So we'll get to that next week. But yeah, taking it really, really slow. In that area. And again, this is the one where if you want to go all the way through to your calf, that is fine and safe to do. Let's go ahead and move to the gracilis, turned in. And remember, you can stay down by the knee or you can get up more into your hip. 1 second. Okay, so we're rolling out the gracilis. And remember, you can roll out closer to the knee or you can roll out closer to the hip or both. I usually like to focus closer to the knee when I'm working on hamstrings. And let's go ahead and roll out our IT bands. Okay. Also, I guess I forgot to show, if you don't, I think everybody here has a foam roller, but if you don't have a foam roller, you can also just sort of pound on your muscles a little bit to loosen them up. And if you find yourself without a foam roller ever at an audition or something, this is a great way to get a little bit of circulation and just send signals to the muscles to loosen up. So that's something you can do also. But let's go ahead and take our tennis ball or lacrosse ball and do some glute hamstring releases. So just find a spot and then you kind of just hang out once you found an area that feels tight, like it needs work. Or you can roll back and forth. And find another spot that feels tight. All right, and if you like, you can test your range there and see if it's made a difference. Or if you want to see if your legs feel even, you also don't have to. We've done a lot of range testing today. So before we go on to the next thing, which I'm going to show you a couple stretches that are good stretches to warm up certain muscle groups or to target certain muscle groups. If you guys have any questions about what we have just gone over, go ahead and type it in the chat, or anything really specific even that we didn't cover. Like if there's a certain exercise in class maybe that you want to know what would help, or anything like that. See a couple people typing. Any questions, anybody? Tops of your glutes get really tight sometimes. How can you roll them out? So by the top, do you mean this area on top or the top of your hamstring? That area on the top. So this is, we'll focus more on the glutes next week when we do hips and quads, but you can roll all the way from your hamstring and into your back, and that can help if that feels really tight. Any other questions? Yeah. See a few more people typing. Okay, well, we'll do more questions after we do the stretching set. So to target the middle hamstring, this is pretty easy. Everybody knows how to do this stretch. So this is just flexed foot and your leg is parallel, kneecap facing upwards. I find it's better to cross one hand over, and also you can pull up. So if you find that you want a little bit more range, maybe if your legs are a little bit bent and you want to straighten them out, or if you find that the outside is really tight or even the inside, you can push down above the knee, not on your knee, but right above the knee, and pull up so that you're in a little bit of hyperextension. If you're super hyperextended, I would not recommend this just because you might overstretch. But this is a good one. To target the outer hamstring, turn in, turn that foot in and stretch forward, the opposite leg. And that's how you target that. So you have to make sure that you're crossing over and around, and you're almost, you can pull your foot actually into a sickled position, and it will help stretch the outer calf as well. So outer hamstring and the outer calf all in one go by turning it inwards. And then for stretching outwards, you can stretch this way, turning it out. This is usually more effective to the side. You can do one side or the other. For stretching the gracilis, the thing that works best really is straddle or middle splits. So again, middle hamstring, outer hamstring, inner hamstring, but some people will feel this more in the calves than the outer also. And then inner hamstring and gracilis is straddle or middle splits. There's a really good set of stretches that helps you target both your calves and your hamstrings at the same time. So I'm gonna show those to you guys. And basically, what you wanna do is start stretching over, just a regular hamstring stretch. And then walk your hands out as far as you can while keeping your heels on the ground. So I don't want you so far out that your heels pop off the ground, because then you're not getting as active a stretch. So wherever it is that your heels can stay on the ground, but you can still get some range here, you're in a stretch for both your calves and your hamstrings. Now from here, you're gonna curl your spine and rock forward a little bit. So you're in sort of this like arched cat position. Then rock back a little bit, rock forward, scoop the head under into a little bit of an arch. Rock back, curl, rock, arch, back, curl, back, arch. And you can do as many of those as you want, but it's kind of an active stretch that helps you go through a range of motion and lengthen your hamstrings and calves at the same time. Another thing you can do if that feels too intense is bicycles, or you can do one leg at a time. You can do curl forward, curl back, one leg arch, curl and arch, and then switch legs and so on. And sometimes that's really helpful. Or you can just stay and bicycle your feet in the downward dog position. And that really helps you find a lot of length. Another thing you can do is grab the backs of your hamstrings, and this helps with the lower back, but you want to grab your calves around the back and sort of pull down and then try to curl your spine and then release. Pull down, curl your spine, and release. You can also do the front of the legs, but for some reason the back works better. Pull and release. Pull and release. So you're kind of tractioning your legs downwards and getting some stretch for your lower back, and then you release them to your hamstrings. And that works as well to sort of lengthen the backs of your legs. So those are just some things that I have found very helpful. There's a lot of other things you can experiment with. I'd say the biggest thing to keep in mind is don't roll out your IT bands too much because they're sensitive. So be careful with those. Hamstrings, most people like to roll them out for 10 to 15 minutes. That could vary for you. You may not need to roll them out at all. So, you know, experiment, figure out if you like it, if it works for you. Yeah. And if your calves are tight, might be your hamstrings. If your hamstrings are tight, might be your calves. Remember that everything is connected. So if you roll something and it doesn't work, don't give up and be like, oh, okay, it's just not going to work ever today. It may just be another thing that needs a little bit of work. So if we don't have any more questions, we can end early. But if you guys have any specific questions, now's time. Yes. Joelle, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So right under my thigh by my knee, when I was trying to roll it out with the foam roller, I kept having a sharp pain because the tendon was going, where the tendon is going into my leg.
Yeah. So be careful with that because you don't want to roll the tendon. The tendon is sensitive. So for you, you might need to roll a little bit higher up and just avoid being close to the knee. Was it the tendon that was attaches to your butt or the tendon that attaches to your knee?
That attaches to my knee.
That attaches to your knee. So it was hurting as you were getting closer to your knee? Yeah. Or just all of it? Yeah, so for you, stay away from getting close to the knee and just roll this area, okay. I think, yeah. Because if you're getting a sharp pain, yeah, you want to be super, super careful. Okay. Do you find that your hamstring is generally pretty tight there or loose?
Yeah, it's generally pretty tight, especially like during the quarantine. I've been trying to like keep it rolled out, but.
Yeah, so another thing that can happen is your muscle can tighten around the nerve and that can start giving you nerve pains. So that's something you might either want to like go to a massage therapist or a PT if it starts getting worse. But that's something, yeah, just be careful, stay away from where it starts giving you sharp pains, but try to focus on the other areas because that might help loosen it up if it is something where the muscle is pinching the nerve.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? And actually, you guys can just unmute yourself if you have a question. All right, if we don't have any more questions, we'll just go ahead and end a little bit early. Yeah, no more questions? We're all good? Awesome. Thanks, you guys. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.